تحياتي مرة أخرى. عدنا لكم مع يعني شخص أنا شخصيا بعزه. That is my experience with him. How I like Congressman Berman, our guest today, you will see why I do. Welcome to our show. I really thank you so much, and all my audience, thank you on behalf of my audience to be with us here today. Thank you so much.
I'm so happy to have a chance to talk with you and to tell the audience what I think.
Thank you. Let me translate to you what did I tell them. I like Congressman Haward.Berman, and after the show, they will like you as well. I am sure they will.
Well, that's.
This is a touchy. Everybody, just deal with you, sir. He feels this, and serious. We really appreciate as a congregation in this district. You are here. You are working for us, and this is a mean of representative. When you say representative, you say Haward.Berman. That's all. I can just simple and easy like that. Thank you again. Let's start for the foreign policy, and we're going to touch of the domestic policy as well. The first of the foreign policy, all of us as my audience are Egyptian or Egyptian background. They need to know something is what's going on in Egypt. What's your view? And for first question here, what were your thoughts on the changing political landscape following? They calling Arab Spring. I don't call it Arab Spring. I call it Christian Winter. What were your thoughts about that, sir?
Originally, I want to be honest, I was nervous, but I was sort of excited because I saw young and old, Muslim and Christian, secular forces as well, and particularly young people, educated young people, leading a movement to bring the people of Egypt into the role of choosing their government. And I had hopes that progress could be made, that the plight of the Egyptian people, the poverty, the bigotry, the hostility could be resolved. But I was never sure how it would turn out. And now, of course, I've gone from being hopeful to being worried, very worried.
You worried?
Yes.
Why is this worse?
Because a group of people who I knew were a very strong force in Egypt have taken control of almost all the apparatus of government, the presidency, the parliament, some significant changes even in the military leadership, and some of the conduct of these new leaders raises questions about whether they're going to replace one form of authoritarian and rigid control with another form, a form that shuts out minorities, that changes Egypt from being a force for stability in that part of the world to being a cauldron of violence and mob rule and not bringing the rule of law to Egypt, just being another way of violating the rule of law with many negative consequences.
This is everybody's looking for the rule of law, but unfortunately, like you said, sir, there is no rule of law in Egypt, and unfortunately, the new authority in Egypt, they are not looking like they will do it. The question here, do you think a U.S.-Egyptian relation will change under Muslim Brotherhood, and how do you think it will affect the Coptic-Muslim relation, and in what way?
Well, we've seen some effect on the Coptic-Muslim relationship even in the last year, and to the negative. The Coptic Christians were treated poorly. But at least the rhetoric of the leadership of Egypt at that time was one of respecting minority rights, even if the actual treatment wasn't like that. Now you see frequently violence on the Coptic Christian community, some of it sanctioned by the government, some of it abetted by the government, and you don't even have a rhetorical commitment to Egypt as a place where Coptic Christians can live in peace and security and without discrimination and able to practice their religion.
Here is a question. Do you consider that still a discrimination? It didn't go to the level of persecution, although we've seen some church have been burned, nobody have,
That's right.
Bring to justice. Many minor girls have been kidnapped.
Well,
Yes, go ahead.
when the government stands by idly, when thugs stop drivers on a bridge or at a roadblock, and if they're Christian, beat them up, when the government allows thugs to disrupt a peaceful demonstration and then uses its own forces to exacerbate and bring total tragedy to that, even if it isn't the avowed policy of the government, it moves from a form of informal discrimination to a oppression of the rights of a persecution of the rights of the Christian minority. There's no question about it, and I see more and more of that. I don't see it going in. It isn't like there was a problem which is now being effectively dealt with. I see it continuing, a pattern developing that's very alarming. In fact, if I could add one thing, this is why I've advocated that this conduct requires that the State Department place Egypt as one of the countries of particular concern, the way we have done with Iran and Saudi Arabia and Vietnam, where minority Christian views are not only not tolerated, but there's acts of oppression against anyone who even privately tries to practice their religion.
Let me just briefly translate what did you say, sir?
Sure.
Because I need them to understand what did you say, which is I really glad to hear from you. You are, or just to know now, which is I knew before, but now it's more knowledge. You are, as a decision maker, aware about everything that's happened and what's going on in Egypt. Congressman Berman يعني briefly said, أنا هتكلم بالعربي، إن هو عارف كل حاجة في مصر. هو بيقول إن ده مش بس discrimination، دي ممكن تبقى على stage of persecution. هو عارف إن اتحولت القوة أو السلطة من واحد دكتاتور إلى جروب اللي هم الإخوان المسلمين. he didn't mention أو ما قالش الإخوان المسلمين, but he said group of people, يعني بعض الناس small group يعني قليلين اللي يتحكموا في كل شيء. Do you think this is the democracy as the United States of America wants to be in Egypt, which is group of people just control everything, and even they went to power with no legal way?
A democracy is not an election. It is not majority violating all the rights of the individual or of minorities. It is not a democracy when the rule of law, when there is not effective judicial recourse, when individuals and minorities don't have the benefit of protection from whether it's the police or the military in the exercise of their rights. It's just, it's an election to sanctify a shift in the kind of authoritarian dictatorship. And no one can argue that one election without rule of law, without independent judiciary, without protection of individual and minority rights constitutes a democracy.
You know, Mr. Congressman, you read what I'm thinking. You read my mind.
Well,
That's always I say.
I don't read your mind. My mind and your mind are in the same place.
In the right way, in the same place. So now my point here, always I said that this is not a democracy, and democracy is not just the election and vote. Let me translate this segment in Arabic because it's very important. Again, because all of us we believe that and that. And اللي بيحصل في مصر, Congressman Berman, which is really appreciation, لخصه في الآتي. لخص إن اللي جه بيه الإخوان المسلمين مش ديمقراطية. ده election, وإيفن هو أنا بس مش عايز أفتح الموضوع ده, وهو الالكشن ما كانش فير. فعشان ما حدش في مصر تاني يفتح لي يقول لي ان احنا في ديمقراطيه. احنا في عهد الاخوان المسلمين، الاخوان المسلمين بيتحكموا في البلد. Again, I really thank you, and I myself, and I want to transfer my wife, express my wife vote. She really thank you for all you are doing. Serious. Which is my wife Susie and I and all my audience. Thank you for this. Really thank you. Let's just watch one thing.
I just say one thing. I don't do it to please your audience.
I really appreciate it. I know that.
I do it because, to me, this has to be the foundation of American policy. And as we promote democracy, we have to understand what that means. And what I said is what I think democracy means. And what we see in Egypt right now cannot, at this time, be called democracy.
That's why, sir, we need some people like you to represent us in the Congress. This is period. Finally, we cannot afford nobody else to represent us in the Congress other than Haward.Berman. Thank you. That's why you didn't say that, and I said that in beginning, in the advance. When you listen to Congressman Haward.Berman, you will like him like I do. I think I did that. Anyway, thank you so much. Let's just watch this segment, and I need your comments on it. Okay? نشوف الفيديو الأول لو سمحت. اللي هو بتاع مثلا. At October 9th, 2011, we got shocked, all of us and you as well. We seen tanks run over young people, demonstrate, asking for bring some people to justice. Like your honor said, there is no democracy without rule of law. I need your comments on that.
That was a sickening but very informative segment. How did this start? Churches were destroyed. The government did nothing to apprehend the perpetrators or to ensure that other churches wouldn't be destroyed. The Coptic Christians of Egypt came in a peaceful demonstration asking for action and protection for their holy sites. A mob comes in to disrupt the demonstration, a peaceful demonstration, and the authorities do nothing to stop the mob. And then what we saw was the authorities ending up becoming the agents of the mob, using their resources to kill and injure and maim the people who are exercising peaceful rights to get a redress of their grievances and to express concern and fears for their life and for their religious institutions. And more than that, that wasn't even at that point the Muslim Brothers or the in the government. That was the SCAF still at that particular point. So what we saw there was with the SCAF, they made statements that, oh, we will protect and preserve, but they took no action and end up aiding and abetting the perpetrators of the violence and becoming part of the violence against the demonstrators. And it isn't like a year later we have hopes that this government is making fundamental decisions to change that. If anything else, there's reason to have more fear right now.
Thank you so much for your comment. Here's my question. What are you doing increased concern internationally about a changing happening in Egypt, sir?
Well, we have a very tough decision to make here. How does the United States government continue in its relationship with Egypt? My fear, and I want to make sure this doesn't happen, is we will define that relationship by one or two things, important things. The Camp David Treaty. That is important, and it's very important that Egypt continue as a signatory. The protection of American citizens who happen to be in Egypt. Maybe some rules on the economy or on budget matters, also very important. The Egyptian economy is in terrible shape, but we will push back the fundamental issue of human rights, of protection of religious and individual freedom, and leave that off the agenda. And I think my job as the former chairman, and hopefully one day maybe chairman again. But
you will be the chairman again, I'm sure.
but the top Democrat on the Foreign Affairs Committee is to make sure and to push the administration not to let that issue disappear. This is why I want the State Department to put Egypt on the list of countries of particular concern for violating the rights of religious minorities. I'm not calling at this point for us to cut off all relationships with Egypt.
I'm not calling for that as well.
Right, because I think that may bring even worse actions. But we cannot let what's happening now go and continue. We have to use our leverage with Egypt, and we have leverage with Egypt at many different levels. Egypt is in desperate need of Western, American, European help economically. There are ties between the American military and the Egyptian military. These are points of leverage for us, which we have to use to change this. We have to stop this trend. My argument isn't against the religion of the Muslim Brothers. It is not against them being devout. It is against the failure to recognize that there are other religions that deserve and need to be protected. Egypt is right now the most dangerous part of this, but this is becoming a problem, as you said, in the quote Arab Spring. In Iraq, Christians are either dying or leaving because the government that we helped bring into power is not giving the credit for this.
As well as the Egyptians, sir. In small village, we observed so many forced displays or forced deportation for them from place to place, for union force to the displace or the deportation, and that has nothing to do. They leave. This has been happening in Rafah, and we didn't see any action from Egyptian government or even the president now. let me just add one thing, and I know 100% you agree with me. We are, as a majority, Muslim and Christian in Egypt, we are love each other. We are live with each other for 1,400 years.
Of course.
The majority, more than 99%. The problem was us for just 2 or 3% or 90 or 5% from the fanatic. And to be honest, I have not seen any Christian fanatic. And who's seen Christian fanatic, just let me know and I can deal with them. Let me just ask you this question. I know your time is very limited, which we really thank you. What do you suggest to the Coptic American committee to get involved here in America and all over?
Well, what I would like the Coptic American community to do when we go back is start educating our representatives. I try to do that from my position, but the most effective education comes when constituents go to their own member of Congress. I mean, I'm very interested in foreign policy and what's happening in the Middle East, in promoting important universal values of religious freedom and human rights. Some congressmen are more interested in a local issue. So they have to hear from their local voters, their constituents, that yes, domestic issues are very important, jobs, the economy, quality of life, the environment, but that we also care about what's happening in the rest of the world. We have to. We have globalization now. When a bad thing happens somewhere else, it spills over here.
Absolutely.
So growing political awareness from the Coptic community, and we already know there are leaders who have been raising these issues for many years, but organizing the grassroots, the average voter who is a Coptic Christian, to tell the story of what's happening to their religious compatriots in Egypt, the country of either perhaps them or their parents or their grandparents, what is going on there. Educate the congressman. We have so many issues that crowd our agenda. When our local constituents raise it, that's when we start to notice.
I have a concern here. I'll go back to the foreign policy again. I'm sorry. My concern here, somebody told me, look, Muslim Brotherhood, they have their own ideology and their own agenda. They use America and the West now to establish themselves in Egypt, just to build the root of Muslim Brotherhood through the government, through everything in Egypt. After that, the conflict is coming anyway. Do you agree?
I have real concerns that there is a larger agenda, some of which is kept hidden by the new leadership. But here's the test. If the people want to vote for the Muslim Brothers, and they come into power and respect the rights of the individual, allow and enforce laws to protect religious minorities, I'm not able to tell the people of a country which party to support. But when they come into power and all of a sudden they want to allow 14-year-olds to marry, 14-year-old girls to be pushed into marriage.
No, 9, sir. I'm sorry for
9?
interruption. 9 now, yes.
Oh, it's getting worse. Yeah. What does that mean for a woman's role in life, in the economy, participation? There are certain things that are so repugnant, not to Americans, but to people around the world, that they go beyond the pale, that reveal an approach which, in the 21st century, this is not the medieval times. This is the 21st century. For women to be treated like that is just intolerable.
Unfortunately, I know that, and I agree with you 100%, but for the vote issue, we have not been voted for Morsi in the last presidential election, and he did not win the election. General Shafi, he won the election very clearly, and we have documents, but unfortunately, the violence natural violence group. They went to the squares all over Egypt. They said, we're going to burn out Egypt if Morsi didn't win. They did that in advance. I just want to mention this. Morsi did not come to the power with the democracy way.
The intimidation, threats of violence have no place in a truly democratic election. And I've heard a lot of the point you're making. I've heard a great deal. Unfortunately, some international folks sort of gave the stamp of approval, so for all intents and purposes, the general verdict has been Morsi is duly elected, but a lot of the information that came out at the time of the election people have not paid attention to or investigated.
Thank you so much for the answer, but I want to tell you something. I will be the first one support you to be a president of Egypt. Can you?
I think that's a
great answer I have
that may be
received.
a bridge too far.
Okay, let's go to, I know your time, and I promise this is going to be the last question. And I know Congressman, he's silent for talk, but very active for work. So I'm going to ask him, and I force him to talk now. What are some of the most important domestic issues you have been worked on?
Well, I represent the San Fernando Valley. It's a very diverse district, but the combination of the slow economic recovery after the fiscal crisis of 2008 and the collapse of the real estate values has put so many of my constituents into a very uncertain period. Their children graduate college and can't find jobs. The public education system for some of these people, the classes get so large and they can't afford always. That's why some of the religious education, where they can get scholarships and some support, for some people is the only alternative for get their kids educated. So the economy, jobs, and education, I think, are the three highest domestic issues for me, and I want to do it. The thing I think I bring to politics is I'm against the polarization. America will not get out of its enormous problems unless we start working across the aisle. Democrats and Republicans finding compromises. I'd like to have it all my way, but I can't. So in a mature democracy, in a political process, there are times when you have to make compromises and pull together both parties when the country faces a huge problem. And right now we face a huge problem. But I'm optimistic that there's enough patriotism among the people who will be elected in this Congress that we will be able to overcome the party differences and the ideological and philosophical differences and find ground that reinvigorates America, because I think we have a role to play for our own people and for the world that I would not want to lose.
Really, thank you. I don't know I'm entitled to say my opinion or not, but I'm not going to say, but everybody knows. It's America. Thank you so much for being with us today. It's always a pleasure to have you here. And really, again, my wife Susie and I, we really thank you for everything you have been done and everything you will do. Thank you so much, Congressman.
Well, I'm really glad to have done this. You've been very nice to me, and I see so much we can work on together in the future.
Will do. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
نشوفكم بعد الفاصل.